93 got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here. It's another episode of Watch God Work. In every episode, we get the distinct pleasure and honor to speak to a brother and sister that's doing exceptional work in every field of human endeavor. And they share their God stories, the ways in which God has been at work through their life and the ways in which God has been at work through their work. And today, y'all, I said, like, I'm not saying I have favorite people, right? I can't do that and be working and community building and doing this globally. But when I say that, my sister, man, our sister, your sister, I'm so excited about this conversation today. What's going on? I'm welcoming my sister, our sister, your sister, Miss Halleemah Nash. What it is.
Wow, so good to see you. So good to be in the building. Thank you so much for inviting me for this conversation. You know, you are all things good energy, all things God's son, all things anointed, all things dope, all things people, all of them. So I'm happy to be in a conversation.
I'm grateful. Y'all always see me. I'm team straight. Oh, straight hand close this gap. Well, I have my gap and I smile a lot and I love smiling. That's just my joint. But my sister is a smiler, straight crest, commercial, no white strip needed. You know what I'm saying? Like her smile lights up a room. But just I'm grateful. Shout out to Compton. Shout out LA. Shout out just my people who through and through that I love. But I come to know you obviously through a great brother who introduced us. And in the first conversation, it was just like, this sister is not only fearless, you are very secure in your other-mindedness. And what I mean by that is that I think in this time we have seen activism, we have seen work, and we ultimately see social, and then we see this almost separation between social and business. And sometimes, even with the social and business, we sometimes fear a disconnect between social business and the people it's supposed to help, right? And for you is this holistic, well-integrated vision to serve this next generation who, in many cases, to unlock the brilliance of our people that is often forgotten in underrepresented communities. You have done that faithfully over time. And all you've done is just change the cap, the title, but your mission has been the same. This is so powerful. It's such a powerful witness in these times. But I would just say the model that you're taking on now, I think is a beautiful model for people to see. And and so I can't do justice for all of the places you have traveled from. I mentor, this mentorship, this program. You have run so much. Chicago Bulls here, run this. Like my sister has done so much, but done so much with a very keen mission. And so I don't want to waste any time. Who is Miss Halleemah Nash?
Halleemah Nash is a Compton kid, a daughter of God, and it's something that I always go back to, just this idea of being God's daughter. Was a new revelation for me within, like, literally in the pandemic, who has just been on the journey to be in service to the younger me and be in service to the least of these. And that is always, when I think about my purpose path, it's like, yes, I work for the Chicago Bulls in their charitable department. I wasn't in sales. I wasn't in player development. I was in charitable work because it was, for me, sports was the coincidence, but like service in community was the purpose path. And that elevated to Chicago Housing Authority, where I got to serve public housing residents, and I lived in public housing. I had an opportunity to work for Israel Adjah, NFL athlete, just incredible man of God. And his charitable foundation that supported young people around social and emotional learning. I did mentoring as an executive director, did workforce development for a while, and now I'm in business for myself as founder of Rosecrans Ventures, where I'm serving marginalized communities and helping them prepare for the future of work.
Pam, when did you first feel like a diamond in the rough? When did you first sense that in your life?
Definitely freshman year of college at Howard University. It's this diverse tapestry, right, of like Blackness, right? You got your Trinidad and Tobago cats, you got your Nigerian cats. I had a roommate at one point in time who was Nigerian. She grew up in Australia and spoke Mandarin Chinese. And I'm looking at this Nigerian girl speaking Chinese and her English accent is an Australian accent. And it just was out of this world to me, just like seeing all of this, just like blackness that was, all I know is like you live in the hood and you black, or you live in Beverly Hills and you black, right? But, meeting all of these people that had different languages. But when I showed up to Howard University's campus and I gave this speech on graduation day, I talk about it in my testimony, I had not flown before. So I didn't know all of the rules about luggage and, how much you could bring on a plane. This is before 9/11. So you can get away with way more than you can now. But I went to the grocery store, and we used to have boys market in Compton. I went to the grocery store and I got egg crates for like my books and the knickknacks and stuff that I was going to take. My grandmother shipped me a blue suitcase so I can have a suitcase. My girlfriend gave me her trunk, and then the rest of the stuff that I couldn't fit, I put in hefty trash bags and I wrapped them in duct tape. And that's how I made my way onto the plane and to Howard University. So when you ask the first time that I felt like a diamond in the rough, I'm looking at all of these Black people, and people are coming off U-Haul trucks, or people are, coming out of their parents or their grandparents' cars. And I'm at the curb with my trash bags and my blue suitcase and my trunk and my boys market egg crates, right? And that felt different than what I was seeing. And so, I felt like a diamond in the rough, but not yet in a positive way. I didn't see my difference as strengths yet. I felt inadequate in that space. I felt poor in that space. I came by myself. I didn't have family with me. And so that experience, I remember I thought that I was lacking. I didn't realize until graduation, as I stood there as the graduation speaker who started with her trash bags, like at the highest place that you could be on graduation day. That's when I realized this was also a part of my purpose. How I entered this space, I knew how to navigate. I knew how to figure out how to stretch a dollar, right? Like I knew how to stretch whatever I had to make it what I needed, because that's how I grew up. Those are the skills that we have coming from the mud, right? So when I stood there, saying my speech at my baccalaureate for graduation day, I remember, saying like, I felt like how I came to Howard University was different and was less than. But what it was building the platform for me to stand as God's child in this space and feel enough with what I had.
God is with us clearly. Often when I think when we talk about even in the work that you do today, there is sometimes this scarcity mindset, even in thinking about how you approach the work, your place in it, there's not enough. And so often you hear people feeling like, I can't go back and serve. I have to get mine. Right? There's not enough. Well, so when was the transition to enough during the time in that bridge? Like when did enough became clear to you, right? Before that time at the baccalaureate?
I was so ridiculously proud of where I came from. There was never a moment where I felt ashamed about coming from and coming from where I came. I was proud. I stood up proudly when I asked questions. My name is Halleemah Nash, hailing from Compton, California, marketing major. Like I was lit with where I was from. So like I was already there. But the idea of feeling like enough was when I had to see like, wow, I applied for this program on campus and I got in. Like, wow, like I was starting to receive this external acceptance, but the part that felt more important to me is that was the beginning of my faith walk. Like, my first Howard University is when I surrendered my life to Christ. And so this idea of my faith journey being aligned with my purpose path and being in this place where I felt different, it felt purposeful. Like that was on purpose, because I began find like the pride in my own identity also in my identity in Christ. Because if we are not careful, we will like easily connect our worth to our accomplishments. And our worth to the praise that we receive from people and the awards. And, you pledge and be on this line, or you got to be president of this thing. When you're in college, you find worth in those things. And so when you come and, I'm receiving those things and I'm having those platforms, that's not necessarily what made me feel enough. It made me feel like I was part of the community. It made me feel included. But what made me feel enough was understanding who I am in Christ. Fully understand that, like the idea that, when God is enough in our lives, I think that he gives us this mirror to remind us that we are also enough.
This is, I appreciate this because I think a lot of times for many people, and I know this is probably my story, sometimes you can kind of coast on I think the basics of God, meaning like God is good. And, right, he has a plan, he's on time, all the time, God is good. And, but really understanding why it's actually good news and how it actually plays into every part of my life is sometimes the mystery. Like, why is it good for me? And so at that stage, it was that, okay, with God, I'm enough. How did just the way you related to God and matured in your relationship with God shift as you graduated? How did it mature in terms of how were you attracted to God in your career at different stages?
Well, I would say, the beginning of it, I didn't have a Bible. I wasn't in a church service. I bought my trash bags and my blue suitcase and my trunk and my egg crates up to the dorm room. And I realized, how it felt like a once in a lifetime and 1 in a million chance for me to even be, like I was below Peace Corps. I barely made the GPA for Howard University. I read my financial aid letter wrong. So I popped up on campus with a tremendous amount of money that I still had to pay, but didn't know because I just showed up. Right. And the fact that I still was able to get into the dorm, the fact that I was able to get on the plane with what I had, I just remember saying, like, if I was ever unsure, if God is real, like I know it to be true right now in this moment. And I surrendered my life at that moment. I had been to church before, so you hear the call to worship, you hear like the call to salvation, you've heard that before. And so I remember just repeating it to myself. So it wasn't a thing that was like, you stand up and in the community of people, it was like I was just there in the room by myself. And so since that journey had began that way, there were these milestones throughout the way where it was like, man, I'm studying really hard and I'm still not getting good grades in this calculus class and everyone around me is smart. Like the idea that, comparison is the thief of joy and finding messages in the Bible, David was a sheep herder, right? And ended up being chosen as king. Like there were these biblical stories that felt like I felt like I could relate and understand how to navigate my journey by leaning into those biblical stories that were so very relevant in my college experience. But that kind of, to your question, once I got in grad school, then it was a different journey, right? I was studying theology, I was getting an MDiv, I was studying faith-based community development and what it meant for us to be God's hands and feet in the world, right? That was a whole different journey because, people, if you ain't been to div school, they will take your Jesus, okay? And then because they want to know how much you really believe. You're going to learn about the Crusades. You're going to learn about the canon. You're going to learn about a lot of things that, could shake your faith if your faith is not anchored. Mm-hmm. And so that journey and like leaning into biblical story, you're this a part of this podcast, and what's so beautiful about it is elevating story as a means to elevate biblical truth. That's what, grad school, in my career, taking the leap of faith to say, I feel called to Chicago. I don't have a job yet, but I'm going to move there. And I'm going to apply for a job that I feel called to. And I'm going to walk my resume in, like to the United Center for this Chicago Bulls internship, because I believe that this is my calling. Like that, I just believe that God has been so beautifully woven into this journey for me, even when I didn't want God to be, even when I wanted to, even when I was like, no, I don't know about that. I don't know about this direction. This one seems pretty good for me, right? Like I stumbled a lot. I wavered a lot. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I built community. I disconnected from community. All of the things like It is not a cakewalk. Like, I'm not saying that God was at the head of everything, and so I knew exactly what the next step was, and my faith was my anchor. Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like, God's hand was on my life every single step of the way, so much so that the open door was so ridiculously clear for me. And when I decided that I wanted to do my own thing, it became ridiculously clear to me that this was an L, right? Like, this is not what I need to do. Right. So it always, like, that's the thing about, you know, God is so beautiful. Like, even when we waver, you know, he strategically places like roadblocks to get us back to where we need to be. So that's part of the story too.
Oh, this is I don't know if people caught that. She threw that, she sprinkled that in there a little bit. The roadblocks to get you back on the path. There's something to that. I'm gonna hold the roadblocks because I want to pull that up. But I also want to talk about even the paths, like milestone markers, because I think for many people, sometimes explaining to people is not that God is giving you the map, but sometimes you get those head nods or those okay, keep going moments. When were those kind of in your career as you're doing this work and you're doing these amazing brands, you're doing this where God had to, like, you had to have these like only God like an only God moment where it's like, okay, I was gonna turn left on this, but God, you showed up and I'm gonna keep going. You know, like tell us about those when the path when it was a keep going free. You know what I mean? Obviously in What We Do, that song. You know what I mean? When was it keep going? When was it a keep going moment?
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I you know, I always say do today well and tomorrow like well tomorrow. Right. You know, and there was a period where I was like, I'm ready. I was in a relationship and that relationship ended. And it was a terrible breakup. And so I was ready to get out of Chicago. So I was like, I'm moving to DC. I'm going to do sports in DC. That sounds good. I did not renew my lease. I did not consult God about this. I just said, you know, this makes sense. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to DC. I like DC. I've been in Chicago for too long. But I was running from a season where God wanted me to sit in that season, to heal in that space, because there were still things for me to do in Chicago. And so I applied for positions. I looked for an apartment in DC. I did not get a job that I was essentially overqualified for. So then I started to network like crazy. And I thought I was going to force God's hand by saying, I don't even have an apartment in Chicago. Like, I didn't renew my lease. My whole apartment is packed up and it's in storage. So I got to find something in DC, and every single job that I applied for was a no. And then I get a call about a new position that was opening as an executive director, which was an elevated, you know, of course, it was more money, it was more salary, but it was in Chicago. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing that. If it's not in DC, I don't want to be running into that dude, and I'm not doing it. So, you know, I respectfully declined the position, I literally reached out to a friend of mine who was a manager at a pizzeria to see if I could get a part-time job there while I look for an apartment. Literally doing the most. So then I get a second call. I'm going through this for a couple of months. I'm staying with a friend in DC, just waiting for a ball to drop. So my friend decided that she was moving. So I no longer had anywhere to stay in DC. So I'm still doing the most. And I get a second call. I said, I'm going to go to LA and be in LA for a while I still try to make DC happen. I get a second call for the same. And with this call, he was like, what do we have to do? What salary do we need? What package do you need for you to take this role? And I was able to create my own job description. I was able to hire a team, and I moved back to Chicago. And what a season that was. I mean, you know, I came back to Chicago, and the person who I was no longer in a relationship with moved to DC. Which was still hilarious. So those were roadblocks. Like, God had to put 17 roles, like, oh, you still not gonna listen? Okay, cool. Let me try. Okay, that you still not gonna listen. Like I literally had all of these instances, but like obedience is better than sacrifice, right? Like I think God wanted me to be obedient and was just kind of watching me falter and, swim around and kick my legs around and like sort of figure it out. But I did end up returning to Chicago. I took that role. That role led to me being promoted to a vice president role where I was the youngest vice president at any city agency in the city of Chicago. And I had leverage and reach to support triple the amount of young people that I was serving than the role that I was serving before that. So that story always reminds me that, like, I have a powerful call on my life. It's not a brag. It's something that I believe. And so much so that God is not going to allow me to just do what feels good. God is not going to just allow me to just flourish in my comfort zone. He will place me in places of discomfort so that I can lean more on him. There's more relations, there's more required when you're not in your comfort zone. Like if this is where I want to be, this feels fun. This is the sexy thing. I'm going to DC, bright lights, big city, nightlife is amazing. I had this whole thing. And God was like, no, this discomfort that's right here, there's some healing that's necessary right here. There is an assignment that is right here. And I was in Chicago for 5 more years.
It was just like, yo, I did the work. Yo, can I leave now? We married now. I was like, nah, I'm going to give you 5.
Nope, 5 more winters. Enjoy that.
No, this is, I think sometimes people often dismiss their design, right? There's one thing to say, like, I hear from God that there's a big calling on my life. And there's also like what you can't escape from. You bring yourself everywhere you go. And one of the things that you kind of you have this specific heart, like Gen Z, and like the younger, the next generation. But for me, it makes sense. I feel like you just have it's like you don't forget about anybody, right? And like what keeps you in your work remembering, right? So that you could do the work, number one. And number two, how does God help you keep your energy up? Because I think part of your spirit, which I kind of came on all live and lit, I said, that's why she could relate to anybody. Like, for real. It was just like, your spirit is just so, it makes sense that you would be in the work of mentorship, because you can connect. So just like, how do you talk to God to help you remember, right? Number one. And number two, your energy. How do you walk with God to steward your energy?
Oh, that is an excellent question. Like, I think so. I mentioned this, I'm always in service to the younger me. I'm always thinking, like, what questions did I have? Like, what mistakes did I make? Like, how was I feeling as a young person living in gangland, like in the 80s, right? What was it like being the only African-American person in my intern class? Like, what was it like trying to figure out how to thrive in homogenous spaces? What was it like having parents that were addicted to drugs and siblings that were incarcerated? Like, I'm always thinking about those stories and the intersectionality that often exists for people that live in marginalized spaces. And because I lived through that, this is leadership from a shared experience. So I can connect with them because I'm remembering like what it was like, visiting prison, what it was like, to try to connect with people that have been away for a little bit of time, right? Like what it was like to figure out, you don't have enough for your meal plan, but you need to figure out how you're going to eat, right? Like all of those things. And then also things like, the first time I got my 4.0, right? And the idea of putting the work in, and the first time that I used my passport and how exhilarating it was to like travel out of the country for the first time. So Mar in the Mama, which is one of my favorite songs, he talks about, like, I know everything. I know street stuff. I know sponsors. Like, I know everything. Like, coming from these spaces, having the opportunity to sort of elevate, whether it's through your education or whatever open door God gives you, it gives you this wide range of experiences. And so for me, I am dedicating and committing this wide range of experiences to this generation because I do believe that they are the future. And so my work at Rosecrans Ventures, my work as an entrepreneur is my active commitment to a generation of people that have my same lived experiences. And there were a lot of, because of the spaces that I've been in, I mean, I am so grateful. I've been in some wild spaces, you know, like I got to watch Barack Obama be inaugurated, right? You know, like I've been to NFC championship games, you know, I received the Holy Communion from Desmond Tutu. Like I also hung out with corner boys in high school. I also know what it's like to stretch like menial means, right? And all of those experiences together is a really beautiful journey. And so how do I help people that are not yet where they need to be strengths-based about where they are? Lean in to the dependency that's required on the Lord. God requires that we have a dependency on him. You know, we are not built to be self-sufficient, right? Like we are built to be connected with our higher being and our higher calling. And so for me, like the idea of keeping my energy up is interesting you ask that question, because it's probably the most frequent compliment that I get. Halleemah, you have such great energy. I just want to be around your energy. Like even my students are always like, your energy is trill, Ms. Nash. Like I hear it all the time. So to me, it takes a yielding. In our conversation, you mentioned something that I put on a Post-it note, like surrendering the day is an act of worship. And so how do I anchor myself with all the things that are going on? It's a lot going on in the news. We're in a whole pandemic. Like I'm an entrepreneur. Like I got family stuff going on. It's a million things that are happening. How do I anchor myself in right now? How do I anchor myself in this call and not be pulled to the left and the right by the drama and all of the things that take our attention? If I'm coaching a young person, they deserve my best energy. They don't really deserve the energy from, you know, the California SoCal gas person that had to come and fix my water heater, you know, like, like that, you know, I had to go be on a call with Delta Airlines and it was frustrating and now I got an attitude. Like you don't have nothing to do with all of that. So when I enter into spaces, I try my best and I don't get it perfect. There's sometimes where, you know, I got to take a time out and I got to be real 100 with people in the beginning and just say, hey, I just had a thing. Can I take a quick, brief moment? Can I just get a moment to center myself in where we are right now? And people will give you grace to do that. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is high energy all of the time, even if you are a high performer. But surrendering the day in the morning, affirmations, and centering myself in the right now helps me to have the kind of perspective where it's like, yo, like life is kind of good. I'm living overflow. I'm living in abundance. I have electricity. I've got Wi-Fi. I can be on a Zoom right now in a place where I have shelter. I have the capacity of my mind, my voice, my sight, my hearing. I am gainfully employed. Like all you literally have to do is just start calling out your blessings, right? You know, like calling out your miracles. And you know, how do you not smile at that? Connect with joy on that.
This is, I mean, I don't want this to go over to people because you were dropping jewels on that, you know, but it's almost, I think sometimes when people hear people at first who carry the gifts you have and have that level of clarity, it's almost like MJ showing you how to dunk, you know, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the dynamic, but yeah. But I think there is something else here too that I think is a struggle, right? And I think it will lead to a question of kind of like, who are your mentors or who are your overrulers? Meaning, you know, because I think there's this fine line between the suffering servant and like Jesus, like saying like, all right, there will be suffering in this life. There will be trouble, and I am called suffering, but like Jesus died, like so. If I'm doing it, like he did it, it's finished, right? So how do you put guardrails in your imperfection, you know, for so many people who do work that requires so much of them emotionally, spiritually, like whether they are DAs, whether they are defense, and they see a young Black kids getting locked up and they carry that home with them versus, okay, this is just part of the work. Does this just come with it? You know what I'm saying? You know, or not. How do you find the discernment between we're suffering because we follow one who suffered ultimately, but like he did it so that I don't have to do it. How do you find that balance so you don't go overboard?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it becomes a question of what do you choose to connect to? Like I cannot control the external things. There will be suffering in the land for all of our lives somewhere. Even if you're in a real good place to look across the street and see suffering, you can turn on the news and see suffering. You can look in your group chat sometimes and see suffering. But the question becomes, what do you choose to connect your energy with? And when you feel depleted by all of the things that are required of you, I mean, I think so much in this period about therapists and pastors and teachers and armor bearers and personal assistants and executive assistants. I think so much about, parents, like folks that are carrying not just their own things, but other people's. Like I found myself praying for them in this pandemic so much because we're just in such a season of need. And so if you choose to live there, I mean, depression will be yours. If you choose to connect yourself, and it is not easy. I'm not saying this because it's an easy thing to do. It's a practice that I'm working on. It is a practice that I'm trying to be mindful of. I mean, I got hit hard with some crazy stuff today within this 10-hour period. And I remember I said to myself, like, all right, I was reading, I think it was like Marcus Aurelius or something like that. Like, you can only control like what's in your mind. You can choose one thought over the other. You can choose one narrative over the other. So the work comes. What is the soul work that I need to do so that I can be stronger in choosing one thought over the other? Is it more meditation? Is it getting out of the house and taking a walk and getting some fresh air? Is it moving my body? Is it, getting on the Calm app and taking a 30-second? Is it taking deep breaths? What is required? Because there are activities that are required. It's not just you snap your finger and it's like, I'm choosing one thought over the other. Like I'm smiling and choosing joy. Nah, that's not realistic, right? Like not if you are a case manager, not if attorney, not if you are doing pastoral care, not if you visiting the sick and shut in. Like all of those things require parts of you. And so when you pour all of those things, how well am I at filling up my cup? How do I prioritize my soul when it requires that my soul be connected for others, for their wellness and their care, right? Jesus left the crew to pray because Jesus knew he needed to do that in order to handle what was going on with the disciples, right? Yeah. So how much do we steal away to give ourselves what we need so we have something in our cups?
Fam, they're looking for you, they said to him, right? It's like you have no time to breathe. Something is pulling, something needs you, and that is so real. I think about I take this conversation as part of the conversation, and I think forward. And I think about Rosecrans Ventures and the amazing work you're doing. And I'm overwhelmed by it. But I think that there's something that's so universal for people, in so many different levels of work, that is like when you hear God telling you to multiply, right? So people see this from pastoral standpoint. Some things are inherently one-on-one. You do one-on-one coaching, corporate. And so it's not scaling for scale's sake. I'm saying something different than that. I'm saying that, how are you thinking about when it is, okay, how do I multiply myself? Or is that not the call you have? If God is saying the call I have is whoever I could speak to and coach one-on-one, whatever my capacity is, they will multiply intergenerationally given the impact that I have. And that's what we're going to be doing versus when God may be speaking to me of, I'm doing this for a season, and then I'm bringing people to be able to replicate what I do one-on-one. How are you thinking about that with Rosecrans Ventures? And just how do you balance that? Because I think sometimes people think about scale as though impact is not just one life, right? So I just want you to, how are you thinking about that with God?
Yeah, well, it's just, this is my obedience to be fruitful and multiply. Right. Like be fruitful and multiply is not just exclusive to having babies from your body or, managing your family. It is, I heard, Sarah Jakes mention this in a podcast message. Like it's your book. It is your entrepreneurship project is your effort. It's your campaign. It's your family. This is my opportunity to be fruitful and multiply. And also because I just see so many young people on the margins that are making so many mistakes where there's nothing for them. Like, people that are formerly incarcerated aren't necessarily going to LinkedIn to get articles on how they navigate application processes, because there's not a whole lot of content on there for that, right? Like, where do you go if you are undocumented and you're doing well in college, but the recruiters are not looking for you and you can't sign paperwork the way everyone else can to secure an internship? Where are the resources for you, right? So there are organizations all across the country that serve these specific populations. And for me, in the organizations that I've been in and some of the work that I've been in, I've just seen so much attention to high performing students that are like really working hard and committed and giving them that extra leg up. Mm-hmm. But how can I push the agenda for people that exist on the margins? How can I make sure that they have space? Like, that they have access to resources? I've had a 15-year career, a 15-year career that has included professional sports and government and education. And I have a really amazing network as a Howard alum. What does it look like for me to offer opportunities and access to this wide network for people that aren't usually recruited? That aren't automatically called as the first in line to be presented for a lucrative job opportunity. And that's what I want.
This is helpful. I'm grateful you kind of gave that context and how to view about that. I'm taking it even a step in, because I think even tactically, when people think about God at work and how best to apply or at least follow God and how they structure their work, I'm more talking about even now at the stage, at the early stages of Rosecrans. Like, anyone who starts something, everything goes through you. Everything goes through you, right? So, like, you're the one doing the coaching one-on-one. You're the one going out to the corporate clients. You're the one doing that. I guess it's more of, how are you leaning into God about whether or not, when multiplication in regards to, okay, when will I maybe not be the one doing the one-on-one? Or maybe when it's more, I have to build this content because this is not sustainable. Or some people have the model of, this is my domain. God has called me in these seasons. I could talk to 5 people, and that's what it is. And that still is going to have intergenerational multiplication. How you think about it?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, that's a different question. Yeah. For me, so I am the general counsel. I'm the lead coach. I am the director of operations. I am the curriculum designer. I am all of those things for Rosecrans Ventures. And when you are operating in so many spaces, it's not sustainable. So in terms of my connection to God, I know that God is calling me to model rest as a part of what I do in entrepreneurship. So I'm leaning heavily on, like, oh my goodness, like, this takes faith, because if God is saying, I want you to enter into my rest, like, I want you to keep the Sabbath holy. I want you to model as a Black woman we are often overperformers. We are often called into spaces where we are being asked to be the mules and to do the impossible. Hey. And so the narrative that is out there is like, we can hire a Black woman to be our new diversity, equity, and inclusion person, and they'll be the co-CEO, and they'll have like 7 different titles, and they'll be expected to do a million things. So the idea of rest is strange, right? Like, it's like, where they do that? Like, who taking a sabbatical? Like, who not working for the weekend? And I believe that God is calling me into a season of entrepreneurship that includes rest. So that means that I have to be prayerful about the things that I take on when I get scared, because I own a house. I got a mortgage. I'm like, I got to work on the weekend. No. We are committing to resting on the Sabbath. So that commitment, like, I have to believe that God will send the contracts, that God will send the freelance staff persons, and I am going to give it my excellence. I am going to give it my best, but I am not going to overwork. I am not going to work 7 days a week. I am not going to be on my laptop at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm not saying that because I'm out here balling out of control and I got a safety net. My safety net is Christ. So when I'm like, I got mortgage coming up, I got, like I'm an entrepreneur. So you eat what you kill.
Hey.
Yes, you eat what you kill. But as an entrepreneur who is a woman of faith, I also lean on the Lord with my faith that God will draw all men and women.
If I be lifted up. This is,
Yes.
yo, this is, this is,
I'm gonna lift you up for that Sabbath.
hey, this is for somebody, everybody. I'm saying I'm actually stepping on toe. This is for everybody. I don't want to talk over that. This is for everybody because I think in the season beyond, people are breaking down. People are breaking down mentally, spiritually, physically. We see the long tail effects of decisions, and we now often don't think about it from a faith perspective. And because of a lack of faith, I work, and then I say, oh no, it's because I'm working, right? My faith and my works are out there. No. You don't remix that. It's not a JD remix, right? Like we don't. No, like because of your faith, you will not work, right? And who are you if God rested? And who are you, right? And so I think that we don't like to connect and be held to account when it comes to our overwork and how fear really drives our life more than faith. And so
Yes.
I just think that that's such a powerful testimony, especially in the context where you have every excuse, like James, who was writing out to the 12 tribes, is kind of like, I know y'all like the Christians early and they gonna persecute you, but I'm gonna need you to be public with this, right? Like, right? It's like you have every excuse to kind of to be working around the clock. So I just think that that's such a powerful testimony and thought. I think as we close, because we have a conversation forever in faith. I say that, but what's missing? Right. So there's one thing to be said about in these verticals, from the formerly incarcerated, from Black and Brown communities, those who are marginalized, and then within them, there's the segment of not the high performers that we strain out, right, for the set. But even as you run into this, is it just simply the funding, or is it part of the yes, it's funding, but like just the door, like it just what is your pain point in these times right now? Right, beyond your capacity, beyond like, okay, if I can multiply me, I could do more. Just where are you seeing an industry that's saying like they don't get it, or that you think that you're praying that God is moving, or God is moving in this larger issue?
I a major pain point, capacity, of course, but outside of capacity, a major pain point for me is, right now we are in this like powder keg where everyone in corporate spaces is talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are words like anti-racism, and folks are talking about white supremacy. And so what's happening is you have a community of people that feel very uncomfortable with those terms. You have a community of people that feel like they have used these terms for a while, and they're very grateful that people are now embracing the importance of the terms. And then you have people that they just want to do their job. They don't want to be on the diversity committee. They just want to do their jobs, right? And so you put all of those people in one space, and that culture can be very toxic to exist in. And we are placing interns in these spaces where these things are happening. And so a pain point for me is just sort of the insight that is required to understand where cultures are in corporate spaces. Like there's just so much fear right now. People are afraid of being uncomfortable. People are afraid of having uncomfortable conversations. People are afraid that, their retention will take a hit if they don't make this quick decision. There's so much fear. And when fear is driving how you develop your culture, you're going to have a really toxic culture. You are going to like, okay, well, we have to have this initiative now. And I'm just going to do it, even though I don't have no experience with diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I'm going to create a whole diversity, equity, and inclusion situation. And now you got people that are way more frustrated than they were 2 years ago, right? So I think that those sort of fear-driven culture changes and new initiatives that are happening are causing these environments that are difficult for courageous and quality conversations. So I am entering into these spaces where people are on edge. And I'm talking about the importance of this whole generation that is pushing organizations to think differently. And there's like a delicate dance. There's all these nuances that exist there. And so I'm just ready to be able to choose the kind of organizations that I am doing this work with. In the beginning, you're doing so many pilots to test things out, sort of figure out, kind of how these things work. So that's what I'm doing a lot of. But, I'm really looking forward to just being able to say, you know what, I'm going to assess your culture here and see if you are deserving of these Black and brown kids that are in my talent portfolio. Where I don't have to test the waters. I know where we are.
Yeah, this is put that in a white paper. People, get that out there. We're gonna have the Rosecrans Ventures insights. Read that, put that out there, so people can read.
I'm working on it. Working on it.
I think of the innumerable gems you have dropped, that I think people need to sit with. I have to ask you, you don't have to give names, or whatnot, but who mentors you, and how does God help you choose your mentors?
I will say that I feel very blessed that I've had the same couple of mentors for a very long time. I have my professional mentors, I have my personal mentors, I have my spiritual mentors. Those are often different people, but I have multiple mentors that pour into me. And, you were talking about energy. Like I had a whole talk with my mentor an hour before this podcast to make sure that I came.
3 hours. Made 3 hours.
You know what I'm saying? I just was like, I don't want to enter in a space with energy from like the crazy things that are going on. So I reach out to my mentors actively. And to your question of how do I choose my mentors? The wonderful thing about like my mentoring relationships is they were people that chose me. There were people that saw something in me and, said, hey, let me take you to lunch. And then, I could say, wow, you've already been open to the idea of connecting with me and pouring into me. Would you mind if this could be something that's a little more formal? And then I have people who I've never met who are mentors, like the Melody Hobsons of the world, who is just boss bay.
Aerial investments.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, Aerial Investments. Yeah.
Right. Like who, even I've met him before, but like how he leans into like the struggle of like being a man of faith in all of the worlds that he exists in is it's something that I think is really profound. And so there are mentors and role models from afar that are modeling life, not in a perfect way at all, but just sort of modeling, how you can live and you can thrive in your faith and in your life in the best way through your mistakes. And despite all of the narratives and the things that can kind of anchor you in falsities, having those conversations with people helps you be strength-based, helps you to hold up a mirror for you to remind you of who you are. And they share their lives and their challenges and their mistakes so that you don't make the same ones. And so I'm taking sort of generational stuff and I gift it to the younger people that I'm mentoring, that I'm working with through Rosecrans.
Hey fam, I think there's no better way we could have ended that in terms of the perspective, because mentors in many ways is like, it feels like it's mutual, but it's like, yeah, they choose you, and it opens up a space, which is why I do think we need brothers and sisters who are aware of the mission, not just the corporate clients, but those who recognize that their stories, they could understand and relate and actually be of resource to this work. And so I wanted to definitely lift that up. My sister, how do, with what you got coming ahead, how do people come alongside you and work, the old Christianese saying, well, we come alongside you and support you. Like, what do you have ahead of, how can people kind of support the work that you got going on, and where do they find you?
Absolutely. So follow us on social media at Rosecrans Made. We will be recruiting former mentors for a fellowship program this fall. So follow us on social. We will be recruiting folks across the country, hopefully internationally, hearing about that very soon. Look at our website to connect with us. We have a contact us page. Go to www.rosecransventures.com. Follow our work. We'll be sending tons of information out on how you can connect with our work and also our talent.
Yup. Halleemah, you the people, you family, you my sister, I love you. And I think everybody else who have listened to this and who have not already come across your amazing work and legacy of dedicated work to mentorship, to local communities, and to those communities that are too often forgotten. I thank you. I thank God for you. I thank God for your faithfulness. I thank God that you have kept going even when you could have stopped. I thank God that even in your weariness, you have kept going with thanksgiving, with clarity, and with courage. And so I pray that God continue to give you the courage, because I know that it's not that you don't have fear, but there's something that you fear greater, who is God, and something that you believe in greater, which is love, Him and the work that you do. So, my sister, I love you. We love you. And I'm grateful for you sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Keep it up, good brother.
I appreciate it, my sister. All love. Take care.